Yeah. Great. Uh, okay, I think we can start. And then at least we can make sure that we actually finish in time and we can go and enjoy the evening. So thank you everybody for coming to this session on accelerating urban transition towards low carbon, safe and multimodal transport systems. As many of you already know, we're living in an urban world or an urbanizing world, and more of populations are actually moving to cities. Oh, thank you, Honorable Mayor. Yes, you're the first. We're very happy that you're here. Great. So cities are growing. We're actually seeing as populations are moving to cities, when this is also transforming urban transport and energy systems, and it's really important that we need to lower the carbon footprint and environmental impact. So this is actually a very critical factor for sustainable urbanization. And of course, we're here because of climate change. So in our fight against climate change. So this session will actually showcase some examples from both low and middle income countries. And we'll discuss what policies and actions have the highest potential to shift people towards more sustainable, low carbon and safe modes of transport. So we actually have a lovely panel of speakers that are here with us today. And I think we will actually just start. So, and we're very honored actually to have the mayor from Kilimani, Honorable Manuel Arroyo. We're very pleased to have you here. And if you would like to open with some opening remarks so you can kick us off for the discussion later, that would be lovely. And I think, would you like to come here? Super.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to have been invited to be here today with that very distinguished panel to share our experiences about the different ways that we should shape this conversation in order to promote low emissions kind of transport, or what others called decarbonized transport systems, a part of being part of the regional ICLEI Africa committee. I'm actually the vice president for Africa for ICLEI, but I'm also part of the steering committee of the Transport Decarbonization Alliance, which is an alliance which brings together the private sector, governments, be them local or at regional or national level, but also research institutions and so on, trying to come together and find ways or better ways to improve what we believe is the best way to have a sustainable development systems. Talking from the global South point of view, we might say that it's a challenge to us because we have been trained most of the times to think and follow the Northern development path. The challenge we have today, at least some of us believe in, is that we should leapfrog. We don't have to copy the same model that the North took to reach the levels of development that they're enjoying today, but actually we could leapfrog and surpass that strategy and be on the other side without having to pollute as the North did. And one of the ways I look at it, at least from the perspective of the Kilimani city, is that by using, for example, bicycles, and actually, I don't want to claim that was my invention. So when I won my election for the first time in 2011, Kilimani was already the city in Mozambique, which are the highest per capita bicycle per inhabitant in Mozambique. So we were kind of an informal capital of cycling capital in Mozambique. What I did was to formalize it and make it a policy, making an effort to and convincing those in the policy making apparatus to recognize that we are indeed the capital of cycling in Mozambique. We are very proud of it because in 2011, when I contested for the first time, cycling in my city, but also in Mozambique, was seen as a second or even third class citizens mode of transport. So there was a stigma. People were not proud of cycling. On the other hand, like, they were avoiding, some of them would avoid cycling because they didn't want to be put in that grade or degrading, if you want a class. But I took a cautious decision to run all my campaign using either walking or cycling. So by doing so, and actually eventually I won the election, and from there it was a slow motion towards what I will call, cycling became a faction because the mayor cycles. I cycle from home to office, from office to home, but also to some of the engagement, normally when it's not raining though. So people start changing their perception about cycling. And more than that, we put cycling and mobility as our #1 priority. Actually, it wasn't out of the cautious knowledge about the importance of cycling, be it for health or be it for the environment, but it was the way I found to pay back for those who had supported me during my campaign. So I was looking around, what could I do to pay back? And then I became educated. I educated myself and my team so that we needed to come up with a set of policies and actions that will actually promote cycling. And so the first thing we did was to put traffic lights. Imagine having a city with about 6,000 bicycles and like about 10,000 rides a day and without a single traffic light. So the first revolution, and it was really revolutionary, because during the first weeks, people were not used or accustomed. They will come there. Actually, the traffic lights created more chaos than helped because people were going there watching, it was like a movie. It's sad to say that, but that was what we had to go through. So we had to educate the people to do that and to understand the importance and the role. From there, we made a second move, which was to put zebra crossings to guarantee safety for those walking. And then third, we managed to come up with the third step, which was the building of the first cycle line not only in my city, but in Mozambique. And from there, with this package, we managed to improve the number of women and children, because at the beginning, it was only the young who were cycling. But then we made a survey to understand why women were not cycling and why children were not. And the reason we found was that because we didn't have the proper infrastructure that would assure them security for them to do. So when we put the zebra crossing, the traffic lights, plus the cycle lines, the number of women and children cycling, almost doubled, which for us, it was something that encouraged us to study and find out other kind of actions and policies that we could put in place really to make sure that we broaden the number and the social impact of cycling. The other important thing that we did with this by bringing cycling and walking into the center of our policy-making system was what I would call like inclusion, because those cycling were secluded from the main policy-making body. By making cycling and decarbonized transport a center and the masterpiece of our policy-making, we brought them from the outskirts of the mainstream political spectrum into inside. So they became part of it because we were consulting them. We were bringing them on board. And so they were part, they start feeling that they are part of the city. And actually in my city, cycling, it's not only an entertainment mode of transport, but actually there are a number of young people who use bicycle. They put a device on the back of the bicycle, so which allow them to transport people. So it's like a taxi, cycling taxi, but also they carry goods. So it's a way of self-employment, which actually help thousands of youngsters who would otherwise probably be involved in crime rather than like, doing a social work and contributing to the economy. I mean, I'm telling this story because there are different points of entry to the subject that we are bringing in. And that's why we have such a distinguished panel that is going to discuss with us. And I just brought a small example from my own city on how we came out to the transport systems and towards low carbon, safe, and multimodal transport system. The challenge we are facing now is indeed to integrate cycling into a mobility plan. And that's the dream I have. If anyone is here with knowledge or with resources that could help us in formulating a mobility or a transport master plan, we would really appreciate it, because we want to interconnect the different modes of transport with cycling, which is the most popular mode of transport in ACT. I hope I have set up the scene, and thank you very much for.
No. Thank you, Honourable Mayor. And I think actually there's quite a few people here that can help you with a sustainable mobility plan. So I think we'll come back to you on that one. Let me just give you your glass. Thank you very much. So maybe with that, with those very inspirational opening remarks, because I think, it's really about how can you actually shift to more sustainable modes of transport. And I think the city of Quelimane, under the leadership of Mayor Arroyo, has actually shown how a city can actually be transformed and to embrace actually walking and cycling as a sustainable mode. And now I think looking at it from a wider perspective of how everything is going to be integrated, and we'll move forward with that. So we have a lovely panel with us today. We actually have Philip Turner, who's the head of the Sustainable Development in the International Association of Public Transport, UITP. I don't know if you'd like to come up here, or yes, maybe we'll call the panelists up. Yes, we also have yes, I can imagine. We also have Eleanor Francois Jacobs, who's the Partnership and Outreach Manager of Mobilize Your City, who actually supports cities in doing sustainable urban mobility plans. And we have Oliver La, who's the project coordinator of Solutions Plus project, but also the Electric Mobility Initiative and the Urban Living Lab Center. We had a lovely session on urban living labs the other day. And we have Tumi Tran, who's the head of sustainable mobility from ICLE, the World Secretariat. And I'm going to be asking you a few questions. And I'll start with Philip, actually. So Philip, you're on the spot. In your opinion, what policies and actions do you consider the ones with the highest potential to shift people towards sustainable mobility? And maybe also taking into account the Avoid, Shift, Improve framework.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for stealing my thunder. I was going to start off with the Avoid, Shift, Improve policy framework, because, I mean, essentially, that's the most efficient way to reduce emissions in the transport sector. If you're talking about how do you encourage a modal shift, I think you've got to look at it kind of like two ways. You've got to have push policies, which kind of makes it a little bit uncomfortable to drive your private vehicle around. I know it's a little bit sensitive at a political level, but it's true. And then you need the pull bit. You need to make sustainable transport modes attractive. If you look at public transport, actually the biggest driver is not about pricing it. It's not about really it's about really satisfaction. Do people like using the service? It's really basic, but people really, really forget it. So you've got to make public transport efficient, it's got to be reliable, it's got to be punctual, it's got to be safe. You've just got to do the basics. But I'm not going to go there, because even though we are at the local government's pavilion, I'm going to actually say what national governments should be doing. Because if you look at the policy levers at the urban level, 20% is actually driven by national governments. So they can really enable cities to do what they do best, or they can really support them to do things. And I think you can kind of fit them in four key areas. I think there's regulatory policies, setting standards, rules, and really how you do urban mobility. I'll give you some examples. So parking standards. New Zealand, they've ditched the minimum parking standards around urban developments and have maximum parking standards. In Ireland, they have a mandated policy of bus stops being 800 meters from housing. So national governments can do a lot when it comes to urban planning. They can facilitate that. And another example in Spain, with urban populations above 50,000 residents, local governments have to do low emission zones. So really the national governments can facilitate that. There's also the economic aspects. So providing direct funding for public transport in Chile. National government purchases e-buses. The USA, they had transit-oriented development grants, which are given to public transport projects to facilitate that. And in Canada, in Quebec, they do carbon pricing. It's mandated by the national government, and roughly 2/3 of the carbon pricing mechanism is given to the public transport sector. So it actually pays for their service enhancements and development. So national governments can facilitate that. There are also soft policy areas, so information and awareness. In South Africa, they do a transport month to raise awareness of the benefits of having a sustainable transport system in cities. So again, that's another way. And lastly, and I think this one's actually critically important when we're talking about integrated transport systems, is governance reforms. Setting up a public transport authority which has the ability to manage all aspects of urban mobility is crucial to that. They can have the funding, etc. And there are many examples. I used to work at Transport for London, which was developed by the national government, but there are also plenty of examples out there. Setud in Dakar in Senegal, Transport Authority was established by the national government there, and they can play a key role in that. So I think, just to conclude, I think there are many things which cities do well, but national governments can enable them to do better. And I think this is where the NDCs become actually critically important, because none of them actually say how they're going to deliver the public transport interventions which they've included in their national plans. And that really needs improving. And if you do that, then you can actually create a sustainable transport system which people will want to shift to.
Thank you, Philip. And I think that that's so important to actually bring the important role of national government. And I think the Transport Authority being that that connects and brings all the different departments together, which is so important. It's not only the transportation or mobility department working on transport. There's a role for all the different departments within a local government to actually play. And I think that Transport Authority is a very good way of actually bringing that together. And now building on that, Philip, and some of these examples that you brought up, what is it that hinders us from sort of a faster transition towards a more inclusive and low carbon mobility systems? Is there something that's hindering us?
No, everything's fine. I wouldn't worry about it. No, I mean, I think just touching back on really the NDCs, I think they're a really important lever, and I do think they're actually holding us back. I mean, if you do, we've done an analysis of all the NDCs. 67% of them include public transport interventions. So technically, they're saying this is a government priority for us. You know, we want this on the agenda. We want to connect it to finance. We want to connect it across different pieces because we see this as a development opportunity. But actually, when you start scratching the surface and looking at the detail of it, that's what the problem is. It talks about, we want to improve public transport. We want to expand public transport. I have no idea what that means. the NDCs don't attach their commitments to finance. Only 33% of them actually put a figure there. They only have really short-term goals. For big infrastructure projects, you need long-term objectives, which I think sets market confidence where you're going to be financing. They don't put a ministry in charge. They don't say how that they're going to enable the local level. So there are many, many, many problems which is holding us back when you look at that. But I think when you do look at the opportunities, because we are looking at NDCs now and making them more ambitious by 2025, there are quite a lot of opportunities to address those problems. I think clearly the first thing that needs to be done is NDCs need to be more specific in terms of what they're doing. Don't just talk about infrastructure improvements or just clean vehicles, but actually look at some of those additional policies when it comes to behavior change, land use planning, governance reforms, have that suite of things. Targets, only I think 4 or 5 include a mode shift target. And when you look at actually the evidence about how to reduce emissions, shifting to public transport and active mobility can reduce your urban emissions by half by 2030. And these are networks which aren't really used enough. As mentioned, the multi-level governance bit, they don't explain how they're going to support their cities. I think that's a critical bit. None of them also include any of the plans that our members are doing. That's a really easy way to increase ambition. You know, we've got members which are decarboning their operations, their bus networks by 2030. You can easily just put that in. A country that actually is good is the UAE. In their NDC, they include all the plans that the RTA here in Dubai are going to be doing. So increasing rail networks and the electrification, hydrogen vehicles, and also increasing the mode share. So that's an easy way to do it. That needs improving. Capacity building, technical skills. Many countries are saying we need this support in order to deliver these projects. Many of our organizations do that, take advantage of it. And I think the last bit, measure the impact that these things are having on the ground. Don't just focus on technology improvements, focus on improving urban mobility at the local level and monitoring the benefits that that's going to be bringing to people's health, their safety, so on and so forth. Because people don't understand about carbon. Politicians don't understand about carbon, but they understand about people's lives and happiness. So those would be my problems. Those would be my solutions.
Thank you also for actually going into some of the solutions, because I think that's really important as well. And seeing how the NDCs can actually be that vehicle to actually support us to move towards a sort of a low carbon transition here. With that, thank you, Philip. I will move over to Eleanor from Mobilize Your City. And you've been working with very many cities across the world on the development of sustainable urban mobility plans. And I think you have Kelimani in your list of cities to continue to support.
Now that we've had the call, yes, surely.
So I was actually just wondering if you could maybe share some examples and lessons learned from some of those processes that you've been supporting.
Yes, thank you very much. So indeed, I work for Mobilize Your City, and we're a partnership between the European Union and the governments of France and Germany. And we work to support cities in Africa, Asia, Latin America to transition towards sustainable urban mobility. And at the heart of what we do are these sustainable urban mobility plans that you were referring to earlier. So this is indeed the core of our action, offering technical assistance to do these plans and to help cities think about mobility in a holistic way, but also to help them access finance thanks to those plans. So I was actually interested in the fact that today the title of this session is about the highest potential to shift, because this is exactly the question that we're trying to answer by working with data and with modeling. So we understand that cities have limited resources and they need help to identify the most, the policies that have the highest potential. So for us, in the process of doing these mobility plans, we start by doing a very big diagnosis. This is actually the part that takes the longest and is the most costly in doing those plans, but it's the most crucial one because the combination of this diagnosis and using our emissions calculator will give you a chance to identify what actually has the highest potential to transition to sustainable mobility. So we see, unfortunately, that many times organization will just go and start doing things without having done this diagnosis or not deep enough, and we're not using public resources in the most effective way. So unless you do a diagnosis and model emissions, informal transport and walking, for instance, are often invisible. And we know that they're key in shifting to sustainable mobility. So we really need to do this in a proper way. So I'm talking about this emissions calculator. It's a tool that we launched a few years ago that enables you enter data from your city that you first need to collect, but then it enables you to create scenarios and to compare which measures have and what they cost and so on. So it's really a tool to help decision makers select the right measures and the one that will have the highest impact. And then we offer guidance all along the process of doing a mobility plan. So we have guidelines that guide you through the whole process, in terms of reference, even to do this. And following these processes really shows results. So, we can see examples like, I'm thinking of Yaoundé, that was a city where there was this plan and need for a bus rapid transit system. So they wanted to put in place a BRT, but then by doing this more comprehensive plan, they were actually able to identify that there were other needs that were equally important for the success also of such a large infrastructure project. And now there's a pilot project that just started to reform paratransit and include active modes a little bit more prominently. And we know from other cities that without integrating informal transport or paratransit, a large infrastructure project like a BRT can actually fail. And so you really need to take all of these aspects into consideration. You have to understand, do the strategic planning using participatory approaches, and also, really taking on this strategic approach. I was going to talk also a little bit about the multi-level action because we're in this pavilion and it's really such an important theme. So we're also working at the national level and supporting countries to do national urban mobility policies or investment programs. And we know that this multi-level action is needed to have the highest potential also. So it's for us, the idea of working at the national level is to give this enabling framework for cities. And today I've been also speaking at like the Morocco pavilion, the Mauritania pavilion, and the cities that I was working with kept asking me, please, there's we have the ministry that is represented in the room. Can you please make sure that they hear what we're doing and that they take into account this action that we're doing? And I know that ICLEI just organized also this summit a few days ago that is really precisely about making sure that this collaboration is happening between the national level and subnational levels. We need to take into action what cities are doing, even if it wasn't their primary mandate. They're now the ones that are facing climate change firsthand, and they also have so many tools for action, including urban mobility. And I think this has to be done probably with carrots and sticks. We see even in the EU now, the cities located on the TEN-T corridors are asked to do sums if they want to be able to benefit from EU funds, but they're also asked to actually put in place the enabling frameworks at the national level. So this multi-level action needs to happen. I'll probably stop here to give you some.
Thanks, thanks. And thank you for bringing in the multi-level action, because I think that, and sort of the synergies between national and local, so NUMPs and SUMPs. And I think it's actually really important. But you touched a little bit upon the issue of finance, but maybe that's something that you could elaborate a little bit upon. How do you ensure that these plans are taken up and move towards implementation and have adequate funding to be implemented successfully?
Yeah, so I was saying this at the beginning, that probably the core idea of Mobilize Your City when it was launched was to help cities access funding by doing these mobility plans. And we're happy now, 8 years into existence, to see that with the first plans that have been completed and adopted, we do see this leverage effect that is happening. It is helping cities access finance because the plans are acting sort of as a guarantee to international finance institutions. They tick the boxes that they need to see, you know, because our plans put a strong focus on climate, for instance. All of these elements are there that really show that the planning has been done in a comprehensive way, and that these plans will, have multiple benefits for the cities. So there is a leverage effect, but there still remains a very big finance gap nonetheless. And we started working on a new strategy in 2020 that was adopted. And in this new strategy, we decided to also work on implementation support so that these plans don't remain there without being implemented. So just making sure that not only they find finance for the large infrastructure projects, which is working pretty well, but also for the maybe the more difficult issues to finance. And so we've identified 3 areas that we offer additional support on. And these are active modes, paratransit, and governance. And these are 3 areas that are essential if you actually want to have a proper transition to sustainable mobility, but that are more difficult to finance, or in the case of paratransit, more difficult even to address. So we're now trying to identify pilot projects and to find synergies among our partners to finance these type of projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I think you actually touched upon that as well, the paratransit and just transition. And I think that's just like you're saying, you've actually taken that up as one of the priorities now when you're developing the SUMPs. So glad to hear that. Maybe with that, I move over to Oliver. And I think you've inspired Mayor Arroyo. I see he's taking notes as well. Yes, thank you. So Oliver, who's the project coordinator of the Solutions Plus project. So you've been working to establish public and private partnerships to co-develop successful, innovative mobility and energy solutions. And what do you consider to be some of the criteria for the success of those public-private partnerships? Like, what would be the key ingredients to make sure that they work?
Awesome, thanks. And I mean, as you said, so we believe as much as in solutions, not just the problems, that we even call our project Solutions Plus. Also testimony to the fact that there was a previous solutions, but anyway. So what we're doing here is giving climate action at the local level a little bit of a different twist, because the way we're currently looking at it is I feel that we're underselling the potential of some of the solutions that we're actually having readily at hand. Because if we only look at it from the climate perspective, this is actually much less than what they can deliver. Because we're looking at it also as job creators, as elements of resilience as well. Because, you know, with highly volatile oil prices, what we are looking at when we look at decarbonizing transport is also reducing the waste on investments into fossil fuel. When we're decarbonizing an electric tuk-tuk, for example, we're doubling that driver's income when moving from fossil fuels to electric. So these are some of the elements that we're looking into, but there are some practical hurdles on that. Is that the products are not readily available in many of the countries that we're working in. And this is bothersome because there are entrepreneurs that would be ready to go and they do not have electric tuk-tuks, electric minibuses, electric motorbikes, electric scooters readily available in the market. And when we do want to develop those products locally, then sometimes the regulatory environment even punishes us for putting in extra taxes, extra customs, extra burdens into importing some of the critical components that are not available on the market. The rest would be. And this is some of the feedbacks that can only see the day of the light of the day when we actually try and test this out and then reflect this back to the national, to the local government and say, guys, there are so many opportunities here and there are some key barriers in the regulatory and the fiscal environment. Also, allowing vehicles on the road also helps to actually help with the transition. So bringing all the way the high ambition and the political support on that theoretical level down to the earth on, so here are some practical barriers on actually making it happen. This is what we're doing with our projects like Solutions Plus, like CSR, like TransSafe, like Access, like others. Because this is the critical bit where testing it out, demonstrating it in what we call the urban living labs, but also another jargon of something to bring key partners together on co-developing solutions. So we're not coming with a ready solution. We are coming with some ideas, then nurturing the environment, finding partners, bringing them together to then bring this down to the next level. And this is where we currently are in Solutions Plus. We have a lot of those learnings now digesting and bringing them to easily replicable blueprints for local and national governments to pick up, but in particular also for entrepreneurs to pick up. And while we do talk about finance here a lot, it is not always necessarily debt finance that we need to discuss. This is true for the big infrastructure, for the BRTs. Yes, that is true. This is the only way that this can be financed. It will pay back, though, of course, if we look at this from a business perspective and from what we can save also on fossil fuels. But there are plenty of solutions that can be taken up tomorrow if the conditions are right, if the products are there, and if a little bit of support is being provided on the business side of things. And maybe we'll just stop here to allow a little bit more discussion.
No, thanks, Oliver. And I think you really touched upon that. It's actually about the regulatory frameworks to be able to support these initiatives. So just wondering a little bit, do you have any ideas of how to actually maybe bring some of those lessons learned from the Solutions Plus up to a level where it can actually have an impact on policy as well?
Absolutely. So, I mean, this is the beauty that we had so many partner countries to work with, where in some cases the regulatory environment is very favorable, in others there are some slight little holes in the system. So one example, our partner country, Rwanda, where we worked with, they had already introduced exemption of import taxation for electric vehicles. They were thinking of cars, but then through that engagement and, okay, so yes, these electric motorbikes that are used as taxis here in Kigali, they're also electric vehicles, aren't they? So those vehicles are now being exempted. And now also through that engagement, all the components that are critical to make that vehicle in the country are now also exempted. In Nepal, we are not quite there yet. So the electric cars that are coming into the market, they are exempted from taxation. But a battery that was waiting to go to one of our partners in Nepal was sitting in customs for 2 months, and we paid 2,000 euros just for that sitting there. And then in the end, it had to be destroyed. So not quite perfect, the system there yet. So we actually just this morning had a discussion with the Nepalese delegation just about that topic. So there are these small issues in the system. But then, of course, also there are other investors, other private sector investors, public sector investors. We're working with social entrepreneurship. that are keen, that are ready to go if just the environment is right. And we prepare with our blueprints sort of pave the way to make it as easy as possible for entrepreneurs. We work with universities to nurture future entrepreneurs and change makers to come up with ideas and companies. So we're just about there. So we are hoping for this to nurture further and to develop further. So it is sometimes just for national governments not to throw in millions and billions into this. Sometimes it's only just to sweep a little bit the regulatory environment to make this happen, and then we can go.
Yeah. And I think I've been also listening sometimes to both local and national government, and they're actually running behind. They're not able to keep up with actually the regulatory frameworks. So yeah.
Let's just let me one more little thing that is also very important. The one thing that we do not want, of course, is that those entrepreneurs are in competition with our public transport operators. So that facilitation with public transport operators, bringing services together on a mobility as a service application, for example, that's a key sort of bit as well, because we want complementarity in the system.
Great. No, thanks, Oliver. I was going to ask you a question around sector coupling as well, which is something that's actually popped up recently as something that's really quite exciting, quite important, and especially in the transport sector, I think. Could you maybe give us a little bit of an insight into sector coupling and where you see the biggest opportunities for actually then reducing emissions and improving overall energy efficiency?
Awesome. Thanks. Great question. Indeed, we're just about to launch a new platform also on sector coupling, where we bring together, in particular, the energy and mobility sectors. And that's in cities, but also in peri-urban and rural areas, where the basic combination of renewable energy generation, storing it in batteries, and then productive use cases of energy in mobility, but also in agriculture and other use cases can have quite a transformative potential. Because at the moment, all of this is likely to be based on very pricey diesel. And this makes many of the use cases not viable. Of course, apart from all the other bits that we don't even need to talk about, like climate and air quality and, things like noise as well. So there's, again, a very straightforward economic case. Solar PV is very affordable. Battery systems can also be at least partially being developed locally. And we work with companies to do that. We have a specific focus here, also empowering women to develop those businesses in that whole combination of energy storage, and productive use. So there's a lot of potential in there, in particular in the peri-urban and rural areas as well, where that are not connected to the grid. And of course, also in areas where the national grid is still heavily reliant on fossil fuel, like South Africa and others. So yeah, plenty of potential there.
Thank you for touching upon that as well. Moving on from Oliver to me, who's head of sustainable mobility with ICLE. You work a lot with mayors and mayors from all around the world. And how do you actually support them in translating the international agendas into local level actions? Do you have any examples maybe related to transport?
Thank you so much. I think that for mayors, it's a bit of the challenge that I face also within ICLE, I have to say, because we work on everything that is related to urban systems, and then transportation is one element of many. And so when I work with mayors or with their staff, actually, it's more related to how to make the case for transportation as a starting point. And then sometimes it happens also on the other way around, more the mayor coming to us and saying we have a transport problem because they know the data. It's clear. Essentially, transportation is the first cause of air pollution. So sometimes it's about air pollution. Sometimes it's about everyone is stuck in traffic. So we would like to reduce the cost of traffic jams and reduce fatalities also. It's one of them. And so it's and then other cases is more related to how do you make your city more attractive. And probably I'm repeating everything that this community has and this panel has already indicated, because I think it's about also translating it from a very nerdy language sometimes to something that can be understandable. And when we have champions like the Mayor Kelimane, but many more that are here, and that were also this morning discussing about urbanism and transportation, then we have bold poster child sometimes, but also champions really that can show that even if there are different opinions and different type of partnerships, then that change is possible. And in particular, I think that we support the cities in various ways, and oftentimes with partnerships with UITP, Wuppertal Institute, and many others. And we, there are like different systems or tools where we collect data, and usually when we create a new tools, we try to plug it into a larger system. For instance, if it's a sustainable urban mobility plan, then the assessment tool needs to be less aligned, because one of the challenges with cities is also that they're asked to report to so many different platforms. And therefore, it's very important, this integration. And it's not only about modal integration, it's really about policy and reporting integration. And then we also, through different projects and partnerships, we support the cities also to create long-term visions. And indeed, what Eleanor has indicated, sometimes the vision is different from what they think it is, because then the support is really related to evidence-based type of policies. And last but not least, it's very important to have projects like Solutions Plus or Access that create a new type of innovation, because then if you can leverage different mode of transport, so for instance, electric buses, to then improve public transport per se, that would be very great, because then it's also about not creating second-class citizens that needs to use public transport. And last but not least, I think that we are all here at COP. So one of the biggest role of ICLEI, it's also about being the voices of cities and bring them to the international arena, and give this sense, really convey the movement of cities. And I think that earlier today I had a conversation, and essentially in one of the previous COPs, mayors were not in the blue zones. And this morning and during this COP, there was the first time that the cities are officially on the program in the first 2 days. And at the same time today, there was an urban ministerial that was also combined with transportation. And perhaps another point that is towards SLOCAT and those that have been working on sector coupling, there have also been, and of course UITP, it's also the fact that there has been also one of the first ministerial or the first minister on transportation and energy. And that is sending a strong signal as well towards the entire community that we need to look at the system approach and not only at the individual items.
No, thanks for that, Tumi. And I think you're right. It's taking much more space now in the COP. And I think that's a very good sign that the voices of cities are actually being heard. So maybe thinking a little bit about that, what do you think would help cities in accelerating the transition towards more sustainable mobility as we sort of sprint towards 2030?
It's access to finance.
Access to finance, yeah.
Direct access to finance. And I think what Philip has mentioned before related to being very specific and being able to, develop strong projects. And that links also to what Oliver has indicated, that there is an entire ecosystem that sometimes it's not fully ready. And then how do you create public and private partnerships that essentially leverages on each other's strengths? I think that is one. Hopefully, what is happening in this COP, also the recognition towards cities will open some doors also for the transport community, because the fact that cities are the one that are doing a lot, but oftentimes not recognized, and they don't have direct access to financing, that also creates a lot of issues in the sense that, for instance, in transportation, there is a double problem in which the transport projects are not big enough to access large funding, especially at the multi-level banks. And then, but then at the same time, many cities, and I'm not speaking about the large cities, but also secondary cities, that in those cities, essentially, there is a need to understand how do we get to that scale so that they are becoming more attractive also for funding, because most of the time the resources are in the bigger cities.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think maybe that's also something to actually take into consideration, is focusing much more on secondary and intermediary cities that actually struggle a lot with actually access to funding, but also support in all different ways. So thank you for bringing that up.
One
Yes,
example.
please go ahead.
One example from the Global North is that our ICLE Europe is part of like the Big Buyer Alliance. And I think that other organizations are there as well in how to aggregate the different demands. But also in India, different organizations have been working with the Grand Challenge, in which essentially the national government instead sent a very strong signal on how to essentially at times about smart mobility, but also active mobility. But in particular, it's quite interesting, the part on electrification of buses, where different cities came together to essentially lower the cost of the initial cost of buses. And it's not perfect. I would say that perhaps the Indian colleagues would not be too happy for me to share that this is a good practice, because secondary cities indeed are not yet fully able to access this type of mechanisms. But it's definitely a good signal.
Thanks to me. You called it buy-in? Was that what it was called?
Big buyers.
Buyers. Oh, okay. Great. No, thanks for that. I think we're coming to the end, but we do have a few more moments for questions. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask the panelists, I think this is your chance. No? Then I don't know if the panelists have any questions to the other panelists. I'm putting you on the spot again. No.
I can't let you. Well, yes. Then, well, we have the opportunity here to. So, I mean, with regard to, like, say, the way forward, just basically a little bit like, reflecting and summarizing. Where do you see, let's say, the path? So, your key priorities for the next steps for your city or Kilimani?
Well, my priority will be, because like a couple of months ago, we, as a city, we competed to a prize from Bloomberg for walking and cycling mainly. And out of 365 cities, we were among the 10 first. So which gave us a bit of resource, some 400,000 US dollars, which actually it's more than I get as my total annual budget. So that's like the most single source of income that I got. So it was for cycling. So my challenge now is like, to make sure that we use that money in a way that we are able of bringing in more money. Because when I started for the first cycle line, which are the first in Mozambique, as I said, we were given 23,000 US dollars from the euros from the Portuguese Environmental Fund. And then from there, we applied very well, and then which led us then to use that example to get the 400,000 US dollars. So my dream is to come up with an innovative way of applying that money so that it can have an impact that will allow us not only to build internal capacity, but also to bring in more resources. The other priority to me, because my city is a coastal city, it's very hot and it's very humid actually. I mean, for those kids who are doing cycling taxi, it's very hard. Like they start cycling 4 a.m. in the morning and they finish like 8 p.m. in the evening. It's very exhausting. So my dream would be to see if I could get, even if it's like secondhand electric bicycles that, we could change so that, instead of using, of course, it's very useful when they use their effort because it contributes to their wealth and so on. But the amount of work they put into it, I think that some electric or bicycles will help a lot in the sense that, it will increase their ability, it will put more speed, but also it will diminish the efforts that they make. I mean, of course, the third step will be to transform or to acquire electric or gas mass transport. Because my dream is really like to have the mobility plan, but based on the intermodal system where we combine. We have like the matrix where, of course, we need that study, we need to see what is the proportion and so on. But I would like to have like, a combination of different means of non-fuel transport, a combination that will optimize the mobility in my city. So electric, gas, I mean, as you may know, my country discovered huge amounts of gas, which unfortunately are not bringing the development yet. Instead, they created an insurgency in the north of the country. So we want to see how can we use gas for development, not as a curse. Yeah. Thank you.
Can I pick up one little thing? So working on the first one, that's for sure for all of us as a homework, because all the projects tend to focus on the capitals. We should focus on the cycling capitals. And for the second one, it's a promise. We'll bring electric bicycle taxis to Kilimani.
Oh.
Thank
you. Can I go home now? I don't need pop anymore. I can go home. Thank you.
All right.
You can take one. I can go there and take some.
No, great. I think that's a great way to actually finish the session. We have electric bicycles actually making their way to Kilimani. I think this has been a spectacular panel, and I just want to say thank you so much actually for sticking it out and being here at 6:30 in the evening. We're really actually happy that that you're here and looking forward to actually continuing this conversation. So not only at this COP, I think we will continue this, but maybe on a sort of a different platform. So thank you, everybody, and thank you so much for being here.